It's Hump Day. You know what that means. Time for the SCWA Hump Day Book Tour. I'm your host, Maddie Margarita, here with SCWA's tech wizard, Diana Pardee. Every Wednesday at 10 a.m., the Southern California Writers Association turns our Facebook group over to a different author to introduce themselves, their books, and maybe offer a writing tip or two. So take a break, grab your coffee, and enjoy as the SCWA Hump Day Book Tour presents Mariana Evans. Hi, Mariana.
Hi, how are you doing, Maddie?
Good. So do we want to start off, and do you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on with you and what exciting things are happening?
Well, there's a lot of excitement going on. I've got a current book called Catacombs, which I just happen to have here right now.
Oh, good.
And it is the 12th book in the Faye Longchamp Archaeological Mystery Series. It recently won the Oklahoma Book Award. It's up for Will Rogers Medallion Award. So it's been well received. And I'm very attached to this book because I moved to Oklahoma about 5 years ago. And this is my second book set in Oklahoma. It's set in Oklahoma City. My previous Oklahoma book was very rural. It had the tornadoes, it had the red dirt, it had that part of Oklahoma, but it's a very varied state. And Oklahoma is quite a large city. Oklahoma City, it has an interesting history. And I tapped into that interesting history in Catacombs because there was a real true urban legend that 100 years ago, there was a community of Chinese people, immigrants who had worked on the railroad that moved underground because of racism and an inability to rent apartments, where they could live. And so they were allowed to rent basement apartments, and then they started enlarging them by digging out into the dirt, and then they all hooked up. And there were 200 people living underneath Oklahoma City. And we have government documentation that this was true. And we know it was down there in 1969 because they unearthed part of it when they built the convention center, but because of local politics, they covered it right up. So we can't get in there now, but we know it was there. We have photographs. So I said, well, I'll write a history for it. And so I sent my archaeologist underneath Oklahoma City, and everybody in Oklahoma is very excited about this book because they all say, I heard about that when I was a kid. So that is the basis for Catacombs, the current book. And then the 13th in the series is coming out in October. It's called Wrecked, and it's my character is back in Florida, and she has an underwater mystery, which is kind of bad because she doesn't scuba dive. So things get a little thick there.
All right. So how did you come up with the story for Wrecked? It seems like it's a very different feel and setting and challenge for Faye.
And for me. But that has been what I've done to keep the series alive for me, is that Faye lives on an island off the Gulf Coast of Florida, and it's a beautiful paradise-like place. And people love the island in the first book, and I made plans to take her someplace else to do her archaeology in the second book. And my editor said, "Are you sure? People love that island." And I said, well, she can't keep digging up dead bodies on that island, And so because she's an archaeologist, she's been, there's one set in Alabama, there's one set in Mississippi, there's one set in New York State, there are two set in Oklahoma, there's the Katrina one that's set in New Orleans, there's one where I dealt with the Gulf oil spill. And so I have been able to send her all around the country, and that keeps it alive for me. But every few books I take her home to Florida. So Wrecked came about as I thought, well, what would be something new to do on that island? And I thought, well, I've never done anything about underwater archaeology. And so I had a lot of fun with that.
So when you first wrote your first book,
right,
did you expect Faye to have to bear the weight of 13 additional subsequent books, or how did you go about either developing her in the beginning so that she could carry the weight of the series, or how did you go about changing her as you wrote the series so she could continue to do that?
She has always been that strong a character, but I was very lucky in that I didn't have the advantage of the Southern California Writers Association or anything like that. I was working alone. I was very naive. I didn't realize that mystery readers expected a series. I wasn't sure I could write one book, so how could I trust that I could write a series anyway. So I was just focused on making that first book the best it could be. And the character who came out of it was so rich that it's been a privilege to write her life. With 13 books, that's more than 1 million words I've written about this character and the people she loves and the places she goes. And I feel like the stories are standalone, they're discrete, they're individual, but I have created a life for a character who's very special to me.
So you obviously are fond of her. She's probably like your best friend. But what
my children tells me stories.
So what do you think readers, like your readers and your fans, like best about Faye?
She is she's I don't know if fighter's the right word, scrapper. She doesn't give up. Life has thrown her some hard curves, and she always gets up, and she always takes care of herself and everyone around her. She doesn't leave somebody behind. And so she's when I first started the book, she was not a legal archaeologist, she was a pot hunter. And so she was breaking some laws, which was a problem in the first book. And it upset the archaeologist friends of mine a bit but she always had her own ethics, her own belief in what was right. And people admire that too. Fortunately for my archaeologist friends, she went straight in the second book and has been a legal archaeologist ever since. But that first book, you want to throw a lot of rocks at the characters. So you want to give them a lot of problems.
So do you see you continuing to write, Faye?
Well, it's interesting you should ask. I'm willing to, but for the short term, I'm starting a new series. So Faye she's not tabled. She's just out there for when the next idea comes along. But my next project, and I just released this on Facebook last week because we just signed the contract. I have a 2-book contract to start a series set during World War II that I pitched as Rosie the Riveter meets Bletchley Park. And it's about a woman who's working in a factory, building boats and airplanes. And she comes to realize that everything she's been told about the project she's working on is a lie. And she knows that because her parents, who have passed, were physics professors. And so she knows things that nobody around her knows. And she looks at what they're doing. She's going, this isn't right. They're not telling us everything. And so that kicks off the story of this woman who's World War II could hang in the balance. So I'm working on that now.
Wow. So how difficult, or was it difficult for you to use the other side of your brain to write? Because tell everybody what you do kind of for your, is it your day job or what you did?
Well, my day job is teaching writing. So I'm very lucky, but my original education, my bachelor's is in engineering physics, and my master's is in chemical engineering. And my first job out of graduate school was teaching math and physics at a community college. And then I worked as an environmental consultant and have worked as an engineer over the years. But I always wanted to write, and I always wrote in the evenings or when my children were asleep. And it took a long time because I had other things going on. But in 2003, the first Faye book came out, and I've been doing that ever since. I went back to graduate school in 2013 to get a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing, which is what enabled me to get the professor job I have now. So I've moved totally into the right brain world, but the left brain is still trained. So it kicks in when I'm plotting and when I'm editing, and you never leave that behind, and it just gives me a different approach.
And I think I saw something that, did you just get tapped to edit was it a collection of stories, the Bloomsbury?
It's this is related to the professor work in that I have a research interest in Agatha Christie's work, and so because of that, I give talks about Agatha Christie and I write about her. Bloomsbury contacted me and asked if I would edit what they're calling the Bloomsbury Handbook to Agatha Christie, And it will be, there's never been a compendium of current scholarly research on her work, because she wasn't taken seriously until probably about the 90s, when we finally started getting serious critical attention to Agatha Christie. And so now it's time. It's been a couple decades. It's the 100th anniversary of her first book this year. And so I have an amazing roster of writers that includes Val McDermid and Matthew Pritchard, who is Agatha Christie's grandson. So if anybody's interested in that, go to my Facebook page and you can see who's going to be on it in the book, and who's going to be, when it's going to be out, and all the details. But I'm just thrilled to be part of it and to be able to pay tribute to this woman who made what we do possible.
So I've heard you speak before. We've met before, but I remember you talking about your interest in Agatha Christie and mystery writing, and how has she impacted your writing?
Well, first of all, the idea that someone who was so groundbreaking was a woman working at a time when, I mean, when her first book was published or was purchased, when she wrote it, she couldn't vote. I mean, and so she's writing about women sitting in front of juries during the years when women are first able to participate in the jury. And so for my personal research interest is, how did her portrayal of women interfacing with the justice system change, because the world changed so much during the years she worked. As a writer, I'm fascinated by the meticulous construction of her plots. And her books were very short, because that was the style at the time, and how much she could convey in such a few words. She can chill you to the bones in one sentence and then move on. And so I admire that a lot. I want to stop what I'm talking about and point out something behind me that y'all may be able to see. If you can see a frame that has a black cat in it. My daughter gave me this for my birthday last year. It's a program from a 1956 presentation of Witness for the Prosecution, which is a centerpiece of my research, and it's autographed. And so the black cat is actually just an ad for perfume, but it's so perfect for Agatha Christie that I call the cat Agatha. But anyway, I have Agatha Christie's autograph on my wall, inspiring me.
Okay. And one final question. So we have the new series that you're thinking about that's in your mind while Faye is on vacation, or on sabbatical.
There's some word for it. Yeah.
So how is this character? Can you talk about that? Can you talk about how this character, how you can conceive of her being different from Faye? Or
yes, yeah. So she's similar to Faye in that she's strong. She's very intellectual. She's scientifically minded. She's a good bit younger than Faye was, even in the first book. She's 20-ish. She's someone who lost her parents in her late teens. There's a war on. She's lost everything. She lives in a rooming house. But she's got this job, and there was a real factory in New Orleans. It's where the World War II Museum is now, where they hired women and they hired Black people, and they paid them the same as the white men to do the same work. And so she has this opportunity, and she knows it won't last forever, because when the war's over, she'll be back selling dry goods at the fabric store. And because she has this background in physics because of her parents, she's good at it. She's a good factory worker in a boat building plant. And so she has this self-esteem in her work. She has this intellectual quality. She probably doesn't have very good social skills. And so she is, and I'm writing, I'm about 15,000 words in, I'm writing this relationship as we speak, but she meets a new best friend who's not educated. She's from way out in the country, but she's sharp and she's social, and the two of them together are more than they are apart. And that's always the key, I think, to a good series. Faye and Joe, my main characters in the Faye series, are better together than apart. And that's what I'm trying to do with Justine as my main character and Georgette as her friends.
I think anybody who's interested in chemistry between characters, see, I threw the chemistry sort of thing in there, should buy your books. Where can people find your books, Mariana?
wherever fine books are sold, they're distributed through all the major distributors. All of the online retailers have them. They're available in ebook, audiobook, hardcover, paperback, the works. So if your bookstore or library doesn't have it, just ask and they can get it.
And you have a website, so if people are interested in finding out, be sure to put that in the comments. I want to thank you today. What a great series. Anybody who's interested in smart mystery with some southern do they consider Oklahoma Midwest? What is?
Nobody's sure. The Great Plains, I guess, the Great Plains, because we're not Texas, we're not the Southwest, we're not the Midwest, we're not the South, but we have aspects of all of those things. It's kind of an interesting place to be.
So the unique world of Oklahoma or the South. Please look up Mariana's books. I know you'll enjoy them. I want to thank you again for being with us. Next week, please join us the same time, the same place, where we welcome Christopher Reich. So until then, please stay safe and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Mariana.
Thank you.